Hey, Mr. Ang, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, just gearing up for the weekend, ready to get this contract rolling.
So are we. Do you have any big plans for the break?
I'm actually going to London. I have some business over there. What
What
about
type of
you?
business?
Hmm?
What type of business do you have in London?
Um, there is a sports and entertainment course occurring there, and I am gonna be tagging along for some of the stuff.
That's exciting.
What about
I
you?
was a couple of years ago. I went to London and then took a road trip up through Scotland and the Highlands. That was really beautiful.
Wow, yeah, it must have been gorgeous.
It was fantastic.
What about you? Are you doing anything fun for break?
I'm nothing like no trip like London. I think I'm just gonna be staying here and just kind of hanging out.
Oh, that's fun too, trust me. It's gonna every vacation you need a break after a vacation.
I know, right?
All
So
right.
how are you feeling about this?
So we were hoping to get Dr. Rhodes a solid deal. She has a PhD. She is COO of Synaptive Health, and she's looking to do great things at Ascendia. So we were hoping that she could have a board seat position, actually, to make sure that she can oversee how her technology gets used and how her work ends up getting implemented at the company.
So I think it would be tough for us to give up a board seat right now because the board wants to keep its current composition stable, and since seats are limited, and oftentimes reserved for investors and independent representatives, expanding the board kind of membership could really disrupt that balance.
What would the conditions be to open up a chair by chance, if there are any?
As of right now, I don't think that, or I know the board is not looking at any additional seats. Can you explain a little bit further why a board seat would be so important to Dr. Rhodes?
Yeah, she just wants to make sure that her systems are being properly implemented. She wants to be able to regulate the use of her IP within Ascendia, just making sure everything is under control and running smoothly. So would maybe opening
I
a
have a quick
board seat?
question. Has she been on any boards previously?
Um, Let me check on that. So I'm actually not sure. I don't think she's been on a board previously, but she's just a leader. She's a natural born leader. She's head of Synaptive. She has this, PhD, and she's ready to take on a leadership role and ensure that you know what? She wants to be the one micromanaging, basically. She wants to be the one micromanaging her work.
So I think that's one of the concerns that Ascendia has is just kind of micromanaging work. So in the event we were to offer her a board seat, that would you guys be fine with um, the seat with your client and her performance being evaluated annually by the board, and contract renewal would also be subject to board vote?
As long as in the event of any bonuses, performance-based bonuses, that they don't get capped due to her performance.
So we wouldn't.
Like no like capped performance bonuses. We shouldn't set a standard in the contract of how much she can earn if she were to get a bonus.
Would you be fine with in terms of bonus discretion, performance bonuses? would be at the sole discretion of Cindy's compensation committee.
I'd be okay with that in in the event that she gets a board seat, also subject to board oversight, that would be okay. But only if we can determine a standard for board determination that we can incorporate into this agreement.
Okay, so aside from just answering to the board, that would also mean that uh, she would not be allowed to make acquisition decisions without board approval and would report solely to the board. Now, in terms of just like the board standard, that would come down to the board evaluating her performance annually based on achievement of strategic and financial goals, leadership, culture, and ethics.
Okay. We can make that work for us. On the topic of ethics, if Ascendia is committed to ethics and ensuring its own accountability, um, we know that obviously federal and state law already prohibit discrimination, but I think Dr. Rhodes would really appreciate if there were direct contractual safeguards against any bias. Would you be okay with incorporating an anti-discrimination clause as well?
Yeah, anti-discrimination clause would be fine.
Okay, awesome.
In terms of IP ownership, what Cindy is looking for is all products and inventions developed during your client's employment would belong ownership wise to Ascendia.
That's okay. We can agree to that. What about her prop intellectual property developed prior to her employment? Can Dr. Rhodes retain the right to that?
So Ascendia would prefer to have a perpetual license to use any pre-employment tools that she would bring.
How how would that work in the event of, say, a termination or eventually she decides to segue into another role somewhere else? How how would that work with her previously developed IP?
So it would be really difficult for Ascendia to, if we were to incorporate her previously developed IP into our systems, it would be really difficult for us to get rid of and clear all of that out in the event that there was a termination. And so we would be willing to offer like an annual fee or whatever in order to retain a license to use that previously developed IP.
So just a license to use, but not her rights to her algorithms and IP that she creates. She can maintain those rights, and you guys would pay a fee just to continue using it in the event of a termination.
Right. She would still retain ownership of all IP that was developed before her employment with Ascendia.
How much would the fee be? A ballpark. We don't need to determine it right now because I feel like determining her salary and some other major clauses are more of our priority. But just to get an idea if this would be a worthwhile thing to include.
So I think based on the conversations I've had with the board, we're definitely willing to pay a fee in order to retain a license to use the previously developed IP. But at this point, I think it would really come down to us having to evaluate how much of the IP we would end up using. And then
Okay.
I think once we're able to do that, we could then come up with a fee and negotiate that at a later date, if you would be
Okay.
okay with that.
Yeah, I think that would work. We can put a pin in that. In terms of negotiating fees, what was Ascendia's idea of a good annual salary for Dr. Rhodes?
So we paid our previous CEO close to 275,000 a year. So we think that would be a good starting spot.
So I actually just while we were talking was looking through my notes and I found what you previously asked me, and Dr. Rhodes has actually served on multiple advisory boards in the biotech space, and she was featured in Fast Company for her work in ethical AI. Um, with her COO experience as well, and of course her degree, her level of education, and her proficiency in this material, we were thinking a little bit higher than that would be preferable, like maybe 375 annually, just due to her stature.
We could probably come up slightly in terms of salary to about 300, but we would also be willing to give a 1% equity interest to your client along with an annual wellness budget of 5,000 a year.
Would this be including a paid sabbatical after like X amount of years of service? Like,
So we aren't willing to pay for a sabbatical, but we'd also be willing to throw in an executive kind of professional development budget for also roughly 5,000 a year too. So it would be an annual wellness budget of 5,000, a professional development budget of 5,000, annual salary of around 300,000, and a 1% equity interest.
let me think a minute. What if we did some moving around of the funds? What if we did 325 for this annual salary with a 2.5% equity, but we cut that wellness and professional development budget to just 5 for both. We ignore the paid sabbatical. We understand it's off the table. And we can include some mutual protections for us, like an anti-dilution clause. On our end, I know that that would be preferred if we were to implement this level of equity.
So we could do the 325 and the 2.5% equity interest, but we would require a vesting trigger where the equity vesting would accelerate only upon a change in control and involuntary termination.
So, do you
This that that type of structure would really just ensure that your client would stay motivated to stay if the company were to be acquired, and it would avoid giving her a golden parachute if she continues in her role and reassures investors that equity is only accelerated in a true loss of job situation.
So I think we can have a win-win here. Because what you're describing is a double trigger acceleration, which it accelerates the vesting of equity if there's a change in control, but also the termination. The anti-dilution is more of a financial protection in the sense of if there is an acquisition without the termination. So Ascendia gets acquired hypothetically down the line while she's still working there, and they decide to hand out extra shares to shareholders. So that would adjust her percent of ownership, therefore diluting it. So this 2.5% that we argue right now in this hypothetical acquisition down the line, they issue out shares. She ends up now with 1.5% equity because everything got diluted. So to protect her from that, we would also want to include the anti-dilution clause. So we can also do the double trigger to protect Ascendia, but we would also like to incorporate the anti-dilution clause.
Okay, I think we can meet you in the middle there and agree to that.
Thank you.
Now, we would want a 12, we're looking for a 12-month non-compete uh, clause. That way, it would protect Ascendia by preventing a departing or your client from departing and then immediately joining or starting with a competitor and using our strategies and relationships against us.
So I think maybe we should limit that in direction and scope. Just the length of time, I think, is a little bit excessive. Would you be willing to cut that down at all? Like maybe to 6 months? Because we don't want to unfairly restrict her ability to work in her industry. I think 6 months is enough to protect Ascendia from getting harmed by competitors, but also not, like shortening to delegitimate interests, just keeping everything.
Well, I think we could potentially tie in this non-compete clause with severance. So, just in terms of severance pay in the event that uh, we were to go our separate ways, would you be willing to do 6 months for the non-compete clause as well as 6 months severance pay that would be paid out monthly instead of one lump sum? And the severance pay, uh, we would tie that severance pay to compliance with covenants with a clawback option for Ascendia in the event she were to breach one of the covenants.
I think that that is a reasonable trade-off. I would say that shows that you guys value stability still, even if she leaves prematurely.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
No, we'd also like a non-solicitation clause because it would safeguard Ascendia's most important assets, which is our people and relationships.
For how long were you thinking?
What do you think about 2 years?
I think similar to the non-compete. I think 2 years is a little bit excessive, and to keep it to Ascendia's legitimate interests, we could maybe shorten that down. I think we'd be okay with a year there, but I think 2 years is a little bit excessive because the industry is pretty niche. A 1 year ban essentially from talking to competitors, I think is good enough.
So we could do a year, but we would like a non-disparagement clause that would last for 24 months in the event of a termination.
Would
Could
the
you could you make that work?
would the non-disparagement clause go both ways?
Yes.
So I'll do you one better. I'll make that work. But do you think we can include the non-disparagement even if there is no termination? I think we should include a non-disparagement. We can have it survive for 24 months if there is a termination, but I think we should include one regardless. I don't think the company or Dr. Rhodes, I don't think either of them should be bad-mouthing each other or potentially harming the other's reputation because of any sort of internal dilemma or like the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day. I think maybe we can include that actually throughout.
I think we can make that work.
Okay, let's do that. In terms of location, Dr. Rhodes was hoping that she could have a more flexible work-life balance and that if she doesn't want to have to move to Miami, not permanently. So, do you know how the location of her employment would work?
So we were ideally hoping that she would spend about half of her time in Miami, at least per month. So like around 15 days per month. That way we could ensure that uh, she would be building a strong leadership presence, really helping build a strong company culture, and just really obviously that would allow for a lot of face-to-face collaboration, which is something we value.
How would room and board and the travel be accounted for? Would we be including that in the pay? Would she be getting a bonus? Is Ascendia going to cover it, or is this an out-of-pocket expense that Dr. Rhodes has to deal with?
So we would be willing to pay for first class flights and hotels for her trips down to Miami.
Okay. Do you think we can make the time frame more of a range so that it can fluctuate each month? Like maybe 10 to 15 days has to be in person in Miami, but it doesn't set her to a very firm 15 days. God forbid something comes up, she doesn't have to be meeting this standard.
Yeah, we could do 10 to 15 days as long as she would be working at least 10 days a month in Miami.
We can do that.
In terms of bonuses, um, all performance bonuses would be at the sole discretion of the of Ascendia's compensation committee.
Okay. And but they wouldn't be capped, correct? We're not deciding on a cap for them. It's just truly based on her performance about the standard we discussed previously with how the board is evaluating her, right?
Yes, yeah, that would be fine, but we would request a publicity clause. That way, there would be company approval or company approval would be required for press or media features about the CEO.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Just really any sort of story or thing that could affect Ascendia, just in terms of the press or media, like press or media features. Anything that she would have interest in doing would require company approval.
Okay, I think that's fair. In terms of dispute resolution, if anything were to happen, Dr. Rhodes does not want to get forced into arbitration. You know, for a CEO level role, disputes don't really need to be hidden behind closed doors like that. I think companies, uh, they need to treat executives fairly. And if Sendia really believes in doing that, as they say that they do, like when we agreed on the anti-discrimination, then there's no need to force the arbitration. I think we can discuss maybe good faith efforts prior to even attempting to litigate, but I don't think we need to force arbitration.
That's
But
fine. But I think it's important to note, just in terms of potential disputes, things like that, Ascendia can't have uncapped indemnification. So Ascendia would not indemnify your clients against regulatory fines unless they were caused by board action.
I'm sorry, do you mind explaining that a little bit? I'm not
Sure. Yeah, because just with regulatory fines, those are usually caused um, by personal misconduct or negligence, and covering them could encourage risky behavior or send the wrong message to regulators or our investors. With that being said, we would be willing to indemnify her for costs that would arise when she's acting in good faith within the scope of her role. And that
Okay.
would cover things like legal defense expenses, settlements, or damages tied to lawsuits or regulatory actions against the company when she was carrying out board approved strategies.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Would you be willing to just to stay consistent with the non-disclosure agreement that our clients previously engaged in to maintain New York law and New York forum for any disputes that arise?
Yeah, that would be fine.
And then in terms of the productivity platforms, like the performance dashboards, the internal systems, were you thinking that Dr. Rhodes can have some leeway and choice there, or does Ascendia have like strict protocols that they follow?
So we have strict protocols that we follow and would require Dr. Rhodes to follow. So she would have to use the Cindy's internal systems and cybersecurity protocols, not anything from the outside.
That would be okay. That's understandable. So, just because we were on the topic of disputes, just remind me, we mentioned anything before Ascendia, like anything before her scope of employment, any IP, it remains hers. Her right, the rights remain hers, right? So we can have a no license clause in there where we ensure that the rights don't transfer.
The rights and the ownership rights would remain with Dr. Rhodes, but Ascendia would have the right to continue to use that IP that was developed beforehand, uh, and then we would pay her a fee moving forward in the event she were to be terminated.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot about that.
And also to reiterate, just in terms of mergers and acquisitions decisions, Dr. Rhodes would be required to get board approval for anything like that, and she would answer solely to the board and not any outside kind of co-founders.
Yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay.
Especially with all the protocol like monitoring her. Um, the final thing that I can think of right now is in terms of when we use the words best efforts in this agreement, like we'll use their best efforts to ensure that, just as an example, no confidential information gets leaked. How do you define best efforts? Because Dr. Rhodes defines it, well, how we define it is as not requiring in Ascendia's case, a change of core business strategy to achieve whatever the objective is, or not having to act in a way that will make the client insolvent or any risk of financial ruin. We can negotiate this further later, but just ensuring that best efforts doesn't go too far.
Yeah, I think we can continue to negotiate it further down the line, but I think at this point, kind of really what we were looking for is just in terms of best efforts, Dr. Rhodes being willing to do everything necessary to accomplish certain goals, even if that were to require like extra time
Okay.
um,
See?
or expense.
See, but everything necessary, any necessary expense, I think we need to limit that because we don't want to put her, or if the roles are reversed, Ascendia in a position where they're going to be in financial trouble, right?
Right. No, that makes sense. I will have further conversations with the board and get back to you. So that way we can continue to negotiate that and make sure it works for both parties.
Yeah, that sounds good with me. All right, council, I think I've hit everything on my notes for today. Of course, we can revisit this, and I'm sure we will as things come up. But is there anything else that you would like to tackle today?
I think we are good on our end.
Amazing. Well, have a great weekend.
All right. See you, council.
Looking forward to working with you.